TJ Pittenger of College Football Addiction. I was shocked to see this week that Utah has named its next head football coach. When I got that notification, I was like, oh, what? Because, there have been the murmurs of like crazy Uncle Kyle Whittingham being ready to retire at some point and talking about how, we just saw Nick Saban do it, and expansion and realignment takes a toll on these guys, as does NIL. And now Morgan Scalley has been named the next football coach for the second time, by the way. They're like, hey, look, Scalley's going to be the predecessor to Whittingham. And they said that around until 2020, where they're like, hey, just kidding. We found some text messages where he used a slur. Not anymore. And then a few years later, just kidding again. He is going to be the next football coach. Do you think that this is the sign that Whittingham, who's in his mid-60s now, is ready to head out the door sooner than later?
Yeah, I mean, probably, right. And I think I do think it's a smart move, right? Like maybe they waited out cancel culture, and cancel culture has maybe died a little bit. And so they're able to bring it back. But I do think it's smart, because what gets recruited against so much is your longevity at a school, right? I remember, being around Florida State so much when the Seminoles were bad, right? And they won 3 years in Norvell's first year and they won 5 the next year. All the recruiting against Florida State was, well, Norvell's not even going to be there. I think it's what Florida's struggling right now with Billy Napier. Like, they're going to recruit, I think, in like the 20s this year. They're not supposed to be very good on the field, and we'll see if he does actually even make it through the year. But I think it's hard to lock elite kids in. And obviously Florida, Utah, Florida State, all kind of recruiting for different kids. But I do think it's what's smart, because when you are recruiting, that's what's used against you. And Utah, we'll talk about a team that's expected to be very good this year. And you should be able to capitalize that on the trail. And so if you're at least kind of calming that some, hey, we've got a plan in place. The guy that you're going to be learning from here, especially on the defense side of the ball, is going to be here long term. And even when I leave, I don't know, they're probably telling kids like, I'm going to have a role like Saban does, where I have an office right down the hall or something like that. Like that's probably how I would pitch it. And I don't know what his desires are past football, but I think it's smart. I mean, I do think it helps you, especially in recruiting. Like, I think that's where you're negatively recruited against so much that people want to have some certainty about their future, about where they're sending their son to go play. And so I think it makes sense from that perspective. Here's what I struggle with Kyle Whittingham is he gets to the podium and just starts saying stuff. Now, not all unlike Mike Gundy. Mike Gundy's the same way. Gets to the podium, you're like, I don't know if he made a lot of sense today. Whittingham gives me that same vibe, but he's got a little moxie to him. This is the same guy who went to BYU, who for the longest time was supposed to be the head coach at BYU. He was going to be the native son that takes over and wins games for them. And then when that doesn't work out along his career path, it only bolsters the rivalry that those two teams have. And he dominated that for the better part of a decade. For that guy, I don't like what's left. Do you think can he win a national championship at Utah? Like what else can he do? He's won back-to-back Pac-12 championships, taken him to the Big 12. At some point you're in your mid-60s, you've lived out your life in the state that you come from, and you just got to be done. I'm struggling to understand what else is on the table, because I don't see Utah ever winning a national championship. Yeah, I would struggle to see them winning it, right? I think, maybe finishing out with Cam Rising, his last year maybe makes some sense, a kid that he's been with for a while. Maybe, the other side of that, is to really, I think he cares. I think he's a good guy that does care about Utah and leaving them in the best possible situation. And so like a delicate, soft handoff, right? Like you ask for a business introduction or whatever, or again, like Florida State did. Bowden was very much at the end of his time, and they weren't as successful then, but they did that with Jimbo. Jimbo was there for a couple of years and really got to start that recruiting process, start doing some of that recruiting, starting to build some of those inroads so that it's not just such a harsh transition. Like Alabama's had, it's unlike, kind of the same thing with Harbaugh, right? They took Sharon Moore. Now they didn't announce in advance, but I think that what's he got left? Maybe make the playoff, maybe win this Big 12. But I don't think it's as much about career accomplishments. I think it's probably finishing out with Rising and then trying to leave Utah in a really good shape. And so, hey, if I got to do this for another year or two to make sure that this transition goes well, that's the way I'm going to do it. Now, obviously there's pros and cons to everything, right? Like you might look at it and say like, nah, it'd be better just to get it out from under your hands and get it into the new guy's hands and have Scalley, have Scalley be ready to go. But maybe they don't feel like he's ready. Maybe they do think he needs to kind of like learn under him a little bit. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm a glass half full kind of guy.
Certainly not when I'm out tailgating or anything. It's almost always empty. But maybe I'm a glass half full guy, just kind of trying to look for the best possible scenario as to why they're doing it this way.
I find it interesting that from a player's perspective, you're looking at your next head coach and you don't know when he's going to be your head coach. Like anything the defensive coordinator says to you is like, okay, guy that might be my head coach within a month. There are clunky aspects like that. I don't think it's going to be a major problem for anybody involved, but for Scally to be back in a position now to be the next head coach shows that Utah has a lot of confidence in the Kyle Whittingham system and in that culture that has been instilled for the last 20 years in Salt Lake City. My question would be then, TJ, and this even bounces a bit off of what I discussed with Whittingham's college football playoff or national championship aspirations. Has he hit his ceiling? Is there anything else that Whittingham can do before he leaves? Is what he's done at Utah the peak?
Probably. I mean, unless he was going to go somewhere else, right? And have an actual, Kirby goes to the NFL and he goes to Georgia, which I don't think happens, obviously. But I mean, probably, you have to realize where you're at, right? I mean, what are the real prospects of Utah going out and doing anything more than they've already done, right? Winning a Rose Bowl or doing this, that, the other, winning your conference. But yeah, I mean, with the landscape of college football now, and it's just kind of an easy, simple answer. I really don't, unless he went somewhere else, right? I don't see what else he could realistically do. And even like we talked about earlier, if Utah was to get to the Big Ten,
yeah.
I mean, at that point, could he sneak into the playoff as a 9-3 Big Ten team? Absolutely. Do you think they're all of a sudden going to be a bigger player in the chance to win it all? Probably not. So again, I just don't know what else he could. And even that, I think that's 5-10. I don't know how soon Utah's potentially going to the Big Ten, if ever. And so realistically, he'd be 72 at that point. I think he's probably hit his ceiling at Utah. Maybe somewhere else. Could he do something crazy? Yes. I don't know that I'm expecting it.
Then it begs the question for the guy who graduated from Provo High School and went to BYU. Did they fire Kalani Sitake? And I'm just starting a firestorm in the comments now. Did they fire Kalani Sitake and bring Kyle Whittingham in his last 5 years swan song as the head coach? We've seen crazier things in college football, but I don't this is a guy who had worked, feels like his whole career to get to one spot and then got to the furthest spot possible, the biggest rival of BYU, and beat up on that school for a long time. But TJ, the whole of college football, where we've gotten from Utah today, I'm talking Texas, Oklahoma, and who else? Maybe a Utah, West Virginia to leave the Big 12. In essence, one thing I want to point out that does get lost in a lot of these conversations is how sad a bunch of this is, that what we know of college football is very quickly going away. I think back to Boise State and Oklahoma, now 20 years ago, and how monumental of an upset that was. It feels like we're losing that luster, the same thing we felt about the amateurism of college football and where schools and teams were. Do want to put the caveat, these conversations suck, because I wish the college football 10 years ago was bottled up, though we had it, and I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah, I think EA Sports has done a really good job of in their video game, right? I don't know how many people that watch or care about that, but they've done a good job of the marketing around everyone is someone's favorite team, right?
That's good.
And there may be more people that care about Florida State than UCF, right? Let's use a Big 12. That's just true, right? Then there's probably more people that care about Notre Dame than anyone else, right? And there's more people that care about Ohio State than Utah, and that's fine. But everybody is somebody's favorite team, and I think that's a really cool. EA Sports is not paying me. I'd be happy if they wanted to, if you guys are watching. But EA Sports is not paying me to tell. But I think that's a really I don't know. The older you get, the more sentimental you get, and that's a cool way to look at it. That's a really interesting perspective, because as fans of a certain team, right? As an FSU guy or this, that, the other, I don't care about fans of others. I just don't care, right? I care about my team. I care about my Saturday experience. I care about what happens in the fall for my team, and that's it. But it is a good perspective to remember that everyone is somebody's favorite team. And it would suck right now if you were a Syracuse football fan, right? It would suck if you were this, that, or I don't have to name every single one of them, Wake Forest or Georgia Tech, uncertainty. And so that does suck. At the end of the day, it probably also really sucked when those people when other teams have moved across, when the Rams moved across the country in the middle of the night, that. But yeah, sometimes life has hard decisions, and it sucks for the sport in general. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of is. I said all that to say I sympathize with you, and then in the same breath, it is what it is.
In the same way that Swanee College used to be an SEC member, like a founding SEC member.
Yeah.
God knows where they are now. TJ Pittenger, where can folks find more of your work?
Yeah, you got the X handle down there, TJ_Pittenger. If you want to read bad takes on Twitter, if not, you can check us out, College Football Addiction, here on YouTube.
Love it. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.